Hello, and welcome to our podcast with me, Mark, Stephen, my associate, and yes, my cousin. To full disclosure, my cousin Jeff, because he's my cousin, don't hold that against him. You know, it's not his fault. Anyway,
Everyone does.
anyway, I'm going to get Jeff to introduce himself, who he is, and then we're going to do our normal roundtable discussions. Okay, so off you go, Jeff.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Townsend. I'm Mark's cousin, but I'm also the founder of the Critical Minerals Association in the UK. We also have CMA branches or associations in Australia and the USA as well.
Okay. Well, we go to a normal format. Stephen, have you got anything you'd like to begin with today?
Well, I was going to talk about what's happening in the US today. However, I discovered that Jeff would be here with us this morning, and so I did a quick recce on what I was wanting to talk about 3 weeks ago, right? Which was South Africa. I know that Jeff he's got a certain experience in South Africa, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I was born in South Africa, so I did a little bit of growing up there, and then my first job out of university was actually in South Africa as well. So a country very close to my heart.
Right. So I've also got some distant relatives that when I was a lad, they lived there in South Africa too. And during that time, apartheid was in full swing. And I know that Nelson Mandela, he did an awful lot to try and get rid of apartheid. You know, he joined the ANC in 1944, if I'm not mistaken. He was held a political prisoner for a long time. And when he eventually left the prison, he became South Africa's leader. Right? And his legacy was to be rid of apartheid. Right. However, what I'm seeing recently is apartheid in South Africa, only the inverse apartheid of what was kicking around during the 60s and 70s and 80s. So, firstly, I would have imagined that Nelson Mandela would be spinning in his grave, knowing if he knew that apartheid, positive apartheid, I suppose they'd call it, is happening in South Africa. I don't know if it's rife. I don't know if because the white people in South Africa only make up. I was surprised about this. They only make up 7% of the population of South Africa. I think there's about 3 million white people that live in South Africa. And now you see a lot more people, white people. Not everybody can be rich, let's be fair. Right? But more recently, we've seen more poor white people living in the shanties. And a more affluent life for whom 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you'd expect not to have such an affluent life. And I'm just wondering, because I know that you're wanting to do some business across there, you know, and I wonder if that would influence you in what's actually going on in South Africa. I just touched on apartheid because that's what South Africa, for the layman's view, is what South Africa is famous for that. You know, And I just wondering what your views are of that.
Yeah, so so you're absolutely right. Nelson Mandela was an absolute hero, and to go through what he did and stay the course no matter what was thrown at him, just the fortitude of the man should be applauded by all. An absolute, brilliant, and to drive towards the rainbow nation, as he called it, with equality for all, absolutely brilliant. Some flaws within the within the political system that underpinned that, though. So if you look at where the ANC came from, so from being in an apartheid regime, and I don't believe we're in a reverse apartheid regime now. I'm not saying things are good, but it's markedly different from that. But if you had communism underpinning the ethos of the ANC, and the argument to the supporters of the ANC at the time, who had nothing, they weren't allowed to vote, they weren't allowed to own anything, they were basically given minimum wages. So how do you sell an idea? You sell an idea that everyone will be equal, everyone will be lifted up, and as you said, not everyone can be rich, right? But you have a political system. So so first thing is you're saying that everyone is going to benefit from this, and the reality is just that's impossible to do. So the politics sold and the politics today still don't match the realities, and that's a problem. The second thing is you're coming from decades, years of being outside of the political system, having the learning and the ability to absorb how you run institutions and states. So you have the ANC coming in without an ability to, without that even in opposition, say in the UK or Brazil or across the EU, America, in the opposition, you still get to learn how the system works. You still understand, and when you come to government, you have the capacity and the capability to run the institution. And that just was never handed. That was never really taught and passed into the ANC system and the opposition. So, you've had a lot of people who just didn't know how to run these things. And it's no slight on them, because you're coming from being absolutely downtrodden and awful apartheid to them being saying, here's the keys to the castle, run it. Very difficult to do. So my concern nowadays is where that's led to. So yes, we have people on farms being killed. Absolutely awful.
I was going to mention that.
Right.
I was going to mention that. And
Okay.
and it seems that the price of life in South Africa is very cheap. People
Yes.
are getting killed for peanuts. A lot of these people, a lot of the white farmers that are being killed are not being killed for their land. You don't see somebody kill a farmer and take over the farm. They kill the farmer, rob what they can from the house, burn the house, and then run away. And go to the next farmer, which to me is, I mean, you don't have to be black or white to do that. I think that's a general reflection of the economy, surely.
Absolutely, it is. And again, if you don't know, when you wake up in the morning, if you don't know you're going to have enough food or money to live tomorrow, then that very much gives you more free rein for the actions that you take and what you're willing to do to survive.
When I arrived here in Brazil, I arrived here in 1991.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, there was a lot of turmoil in the political regime in Brazil. Fernando Collor was being impeached. Mm-hmm. Inflation was ridiculous, and that's what I learned very quickly here, that life at that time just didn't have much value. No. And exactly for the same reason that you're saying. You wake up in the morning and you're a father of 3 children, and you've got no job. Inflation tomorrow the price is going to be higher than what they are today, what do you do?
Yeah, and
And nobody's a saint.
and if you're a parent, you're going to do whatever you have to do to look after your kids, right? And that's
Right.
but then you layer on top of that. So now you see failures within the institutions, right? So you're seeing rolling blackouts. You're seeing failures of the legal system to either progress and move forwards with the times, or the way that things are implemented, and that's starting to have a knock-on effect. And then on top of that, vast swathes of the people who held money or positions and could pass that knowledge on have left South Africa through fear, through the economy, opportunities. So now you have a large number of people leaving South Africa, black and white, and that has a massive impact on your ability to run that country and for that country to be successful. And it truly hurts me. I was born in South Africa. I love the country. When I get off that plane, when I get back to that, and you're hit with that heat, it's like I'm home, right? I'm home. But it's not home right now, and it's not home to a lot of people who would have said before it was, and that's a really, really sad state to be in.
Yeah, I think if you look at the I suppose it's the federal government, isn't it, in South Africa, because there are only 7% of the population is white or was white when the stats came out. All of a sudden, the government is being cobrado, is being pressed by the majority of the population now, which is black, and all of a sudden you've got a 93% increase of the people who are pressing you to get results. I mean, I was looking at the stats. The unemployment in South Africa between the ages of 15 24 is 60%, and between the 24 and 35-year-olds it's 40%. Even as a mature adult now, 40% unemployment is horrible.
Yeah.
And the government is being pressed by the majority of the population because there's no apartheid, apparently. I mean, the government did recently they declared that white people are not to be employed anymore. I think it's more for the government jobs,
Yeah.
But that doesn't solve the problem of 40% unemployment, because you're talking about the minority, which is only 7%, and not all of that 7% will go after the same job.
And that goes back to the underpinnings of the initial ANC takeover, which, again, equality for all. We're going to make everyone's lives better. You're all going to have electricity. You're all going to have running water. You're all going to have a job, because it's no longer we're being held back by apartheid, which absolutely was the key, and God forbid we never see it in Africa again. But if you can't deliver that, you either have to be honest and say we can't deliver that, but they can't do that because they do that. It's a tinderbox at the moment. You've got the political forces coming up from KwaZulu-Natal and causing absolute chaos because they're being left to the side. That's the largest. You've got the biggest challenge to the ANC leadership or government since Mandela took over, the end of apartheid. So they really are on the very edge of making this all work. And where has that led? They've not helped themselves by picking, in my belief, the wrong side in the geopolitics discussion that's going on at the moment. So, the most recently, South Africa has said we're going to leave the International Criminal Court so we can host Putin. Right, and I don't think the best will in the world. So that leaves you with China, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Russia, who's going to be able, and it's not the right way.
Yeah. What South Africa is missing, I suppose, is the investment for the infrastructure. You were talking about the rolling blackouts. I was reading the other day that the energy system in South Africa dates back to the 50s, and it hasn't been modernized. They just, it's like a make do, a very palliative way they do things in South Africa. And so, if when the fuse blows, you don't find out what caused the fuse to blow. You just change the fuse, until it blows again. And you can't have, when one side goes up, the other side must come down. It's like a balance, When you have a lot of people calling for energy on one side, somebody has to give it up, because it can't be spread. There isn't enough for everybody.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Because of course, also we need to look at the population growth as well, which is also an aggravating factor. And so there needs to be, and I'm sure it's going to come eventually, may not in my lifetime or in our lifetimes, but there needs to be a massive investment in South Africa, because there is infrastructure there. It's just that it's all outdated.
So I think, if I'm right, China has invested over the last something like 10 years. China has invested $150 billion into the South African infrastructure. But I did some work in Cameroon in 2012, and I drove on the road from Douala to Yaoundé. So Douala is the big port, the industrial port, and Yaoundé is the capital. And it's about a 7-hour drive on this road that the Chinese built in about 2 years, straight through the rainforest. Well, there's not much left of that road in the bits, in parts, right? So it was thrown together well, very quickly, but I don't say it was built with the most love and affection for building something that was going to be around for a long time. And it's the problem. That's a problem, right? Because China is willing to invest, and we see this across the whole of Africa, where they are investing heavily. They're putting countries into some kind of debt problem to them that they can't pay, and then they are calling in those debts on various key infrastructure parts, so ports, etc., to pay it back. The energy thing, yeah. I mean, the coal power plants that are 70 years old are just, well, bad for the environment, but also aren't going to work. It's just, and you sit there and you think, for a nation that has capacity, well, certainly solar capacity, wind capacity, it's got a whole bunch of stuff actually that would keep them going and be a hell of a lot cheaper over the midterm. But you're right. Right now, the way that, with the rolling blackouts, with the spiraling inflation, with the cost of doing business there, with the lack of political clarity and security, as much as I love South Africa, and I truly do, if I was in the position to invest, I wouldn't go there.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, as I see it, South Africa needs to. I think it's going to happen. Like I said, probably won't be in my lifetime. Yeah. So I'm not talking about the next 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. But as the BRICS nations consolidate themselves, especially recently, that the BRICS nations have been asked. Other nations have been wanting to join the BRICS as well. The only problem with the other nations joining BRICS as well is that the other nations all appear to be poorer countries, or with economic problems. So we've got Argentina, who wants to be a BRICS. We've got some African countries that want to be BRICS as well. And I think these countries are wanting to take out of the BRICS more than what they can put into the BRICS, if you know what I mean. However, I'm sure that as a unit, as a BRICS unit, as if everybody's a unit, a bit like the European Union, the richer countries are going to have to subsidize the poorer ones, and you can't live outside your means. We were talking about China doing the Belt and Roads thing in South Africa, and bettering the infrastructure. But the thing is, it's like cutting your grass. You cut your grass. If you ask somebody to cut your grass for you, in another 4 weeks' time, you need to cut the grass again, because in other words, it's all right trying to put it in the infrastructure, but you have to maintain it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the money to maintain what somebody's giving to you, then it will go into rack and ruin. And I think that's probably more closer to what you're seeing in South Africa when you say that China's built the roads. Yeah, China, they build things cheaper, let's say, and so they will try and cut corners.
Yeah.
But even so, I'm sure that all of a sudden, you put a 1,000-mile road in, all of a sudden the South African government has got 1,000 miles of road to which they didn't have yesterday.
Yeah.
So they've got to keep that up. Where they're getting the money from, where they're getting the machinery from, the manpower from to do all that,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to say it's the capability. Yeah, I was just reiterating what you were saying. Yes, it's the capability, the skills on the ground to do things. Okay, you can say a road, that's easy enough. But yeah, when you're talking about modern electrical systems and energy systems, and even putting in green technology like panels. I mean, I know we've got a lot coming in Brazil with this. There's European companies here looking to do it because we've got a lot of sunshine here, funny enough, and potential here. We've got wind farms and all sorts of things here as well. And we use hydro energy as well here, particularly down the south. And yeah, there is companies also investing heavily in other green technologies here, green hydrogen, etc., which is interesting. Well, that's quite expensive, yeah. But again, this is all technology that comes in. You dump it into a country. You've then got to make sure, well, to sell RAMS things, reliability, maintenance, accessibility, maintenance, etc. And yeah, South Africa doesn't really have the training behind it and everything else. We've seen a little bit the problem in Brazil, but Brazil's sorting itself out, whichever administration we have here. But Steve and myself have seen, as we said, we don't care who's in charge. Brazil is going in the right direction, inverted commas. Hopefully.
I was at the Brazilian embassy this morning for an event on Brazil's role in the critical mineral space that obviously underpins renewable energy and this kind of near net zero. So, I mean, Brazil is a wonderful opportunity, and the world is just waking up to what Brazil has, right? And these are companies. So you're looking at British mining companies who naturally would look to Southern Africa, because historically that's where we have in the past gone. We don't like to change time zones, us Brits. You braved it, but generally we like to stick within our own time zones. But they're no longer.
Jeff, just to interrupt you, just for a second. It's an anecdote. So we're talking, Mark and I, we're talking about on the weekends, on a Friday and Saturday, we watch UFC, Ultimate Fighting, MMA. And Mark suggested that we call you so that we can have a little freebie, watching these things. I said, but Mark, when we watch it, it's 10 o'clock at night. I said, I doubt if Jeff is going to be awake at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And if he is awake, if he's sober for the first round, for the first fight.
It's the 9-month-old. She keeps me up at that kind of time. But well, I mean,
Sorry, going back to the
well, Shogun Rua is my favorite UFC fighter of all time. So, well, actually, Pride, when he won Pride, absolute animal. So, brilliant. So, there you go. So, a plug for Brazil in the UFC. But no, so look, I think it was something like 60% of Brazil's grid it runs off renewables. 51% of Brazil overall has not been explored yet for critical minerals, and yet they have something like 20% of the world's resources. So we had companies who, and these are anywhere from 100 million, 200 million companies up to multi-billion Anglo-American Rio Tintos, etc., who have flipped. Yes, we love Africa. That's our, that's our spiritual home as companies. That's where we work. We all want to go to Brazil. So you're absolutely right. Brazil has set an agenda and is sticking to it and recognizes what is necessary to get and drive that kind of stuff forwards, which is brilliant. Whereas you've seen South Africa struggling and going backwards in many cases, and it's exactly that. They just it reminds me. I went to Iraq. Two things, a little anecdote from there. Two things. One was they have so they pay 97% of the population are paid by the state, but they pay people to collect the rubbish. Except Baghdad is just strewn with rubbish all over the place because they don't actually have the capacity to know who's doing what job. They haven't really figured out how to manage all of this. So people are getting paid no matter what. So they just don't turn up to do it, because why would you turn up and do it when you can just get paid anyway? And I think South Africa suffers from that. And I was in one of the departments, and this made me laugh. My father-in-law was with me, and there was a drip from one of the pipes out the ceiling in one corner of the room, and there was a plant in a pot that was dying in the other corner. And he went to the guy on the door and said, "You should move that plant pot over there." And the guy just laughed. He went, "Well, that's not my job." Because they're literally picking up a plant and moving it. So my father-in-law went and did it, and we went and had a meeting. 2 hours later, we came down. They'd moved the plant pot back. And you're just like, this is madness. Like, it's just, you're getting paid. No one knows whether you're doing the job or not. So you're just going to do the bare minimum to get paid. And it's just infuriating. And I think South Africa struggles with that. Having said that, some of the very best people I know, but they have, a lot of them have traveled internationally now for work, are South African. My mind goes to one person called Zama. She's an absolute brilliant ESG person in the mining sector. And she's wonderful. She's very gregarious, very smart, does really good work. So, it's churning out some very good people. It's just that's not feeding into the overall running of the country.
Yes.
Yeah, you say about the mentality of, it's not my job. Is that I seem to remember many years ago when I was in the UK that was a similar mentality with council house tenants. If you get a small broken window and in the middle of winter, the people would rather freeze and say it's the council's job to change my window, to put another pane of glass in the window, than it would for me to spend about £5 to get a pane of glass and stick it in myself.
Well, I mean, it is. There is certainly that is a creeping mentality in the UK, and actually, someone in Cornwall filled in a pothole that had been announced, and they'd known about it.
I read about that.
Right, and now he's being hunted by the council because it wasn't his job to fill in the pothole.
That's right.
Yeah,
And he'd probably be made to take it back out again.
Yeah.
Mad.
not
Mad well.
not done to the right quality or the right materials, or
At least it was done.
Yeah,
Mad.
I mean, yeah, I came from my effective career started on the National British Rail. So if we're talking demarcation, nationalised joking and everything else, I grew up in that. Yeah, we all took advantage of it. Nothing was ever our job, always somebody else's. And yeah, I'm not going. That's not to decry anyone on the railway, because there was a lot of hard work done even back then, and we kept the railway going. It was South African syndrome falling apart. I could tell you some horror stories going back the days.
It's not my job. It's delegation 2.0.
Yeah, I mean, I got once told off for in the snow cleaning a set of points, get the snow out of the way and all that. And yeah, my boss supervisor came to me and said, well, it's not really your job to do. That's for the P-way to do. I thought my job was to keep trains running. But apparently I was told, you got your priorities a bit wrong then. And then you get the people whose job it was actually to do it, who hadn't arrived on site, get onto your back as well. How dare you take our job? Well, you weren't here. Okay. Yeah, you take it on the chin, as it were, and there's a learning experience. And after that, you just go, as we do in Brazil, we do this. Yeah. That's the thing. Nothing to do with me. I'm not interested anymore.
Did you see, you're talking about renewables? There's a report came out in the UK press, which I tend not to. I look at the UK press, but I tend not to make many comments about it here. But I thought, as it might influence the whole world, it might be interesting to bring up the subject about solar panels. And the hotter the day gets, the less energy they produce. And every degree of temperature, they reduce is like 5% less energy, or something like that.
I can give you a technical reason why that would be. It's tolerance. Yeah.
But the reason why I bring that up is because we talk about countries that we imagine is going to be sunny all the time, and they look like the ideal place to put solar panels. When if they become too sunny, which for us Brits, here a cold day is a hot day in the UK. South Africa is the same. You've got all these expanses of ground, but they get really, really hot. And so the layman would say, well, they are ideal places to set up solar farms. However, if it gets too sunny and the production of energy is being reduced every degree higher, above 20 degrees, 25 degrees, it seems like it's defeating its own purpose, surely.
Well, that can happen because of tolerance of materials, cables and other parts in there. They have a heat tolerance. So you have to look at what the country is, the setting, and yes, that can happen. I can see how that would be a problem, because we have problems on the railway with this extreme temperatures, goes up and down. What do you set it for? Yeah, I mean, in South Africa, you'll have units that should be able to do that. In Brazil, you have units as well. And it doesn't matter what you do, the hotter things get, that it increases resistance in circuits, etc. And yeah, I mean, how do you do that? I mean, yes, they've had a problem with the reverse in the UK with wind farms having to run diesel generated heaters to actually keep the things running. It's again, it's the reverse. So what would you do there? You'd have to have fans running, so you'd be taking part of the energy of what you're producing. You're not going to get a free lunch from anything. And this is what we've got to look at, whether the fabrication of these things, making them, is effective or not, which is where ESG has got to be looking at it. With technology, we resolve these issues eventually when we find them. Again, we can't be put off by issues, and we laugh about it. I'm not all one for putting green things in for green things' sake. I mean, there is a good argument to have solar panels in remote parts of Brazil, even running cables there. Getting, we live in a big country, and with people in the UK, you don't realise that until you live here. We live in a big country like South Africa is, and it shocks you when you first move here. Going to a party 700 kilometres away, almost. That's nothing. That's the end of one of my states to the end of Pernambuco to the other, almost. Which is almost the length of the UK, or well, not quite, but England, that's it.
I was laughing because we're talking about gigafactories, and could you build cathode active material plants in the UK and then gigafactories, and that would feed obviously the electric vehicle sector. And they're like, oh yeah, but if you have lithium from Cornwall, it's a long way up to the northeast of the UK. And I was like, you do realise you're talking to Aussies and Canadians who drive kind of 5 hours to get breakfast. So I don't think this is the same kind of distance. Yeah, you can't stick them on a ship and transport them, but the UK is small enough to make this.
Use the old smack boats used to have running around the coast. The 10 barges of things, but anyway, I'm afraid, gentlemen, we're getting to the end of our time because we have a set limit. Thank you for coming in, Jeff, and stepping in or coming to talk to us.
Absolute pleasure.
I'd like to say we'll come back at another time. Hopefully we'll have some more questions to ask you, possibly more about the green issues, your day job, as it were. Thank you for explaining South Africa to us, because I know there's a lot, I don't want to say ignorance, it's one of these things that bypasses us. I mean, Brazilians are interested in South Africa because there's almost a kinship here sometimes with certain sectors or ideas. When you're talking about
the history of Brazil.
Is that okay? But once again, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you all again. Okay.
It was really nice meeting you, Jeff.
You too. Thank you ever so much. Have a really good day.
Okay,
thank
you
too.
Thank you. Bye. If you enjoyed this discussion, can you please like, subscribe, and share it? Thank you.